Oh my, it's Gwentify.
Born on October 10, 1954, Julian Kupka is a German-Peruvian mammalogist who specializes in bats. On Christmas Eve of 1971, a young 17-year-old Julian sat by the window of Lanza Flight 508, soaring high above the skies of Peru. The plane rocked gently as she looked at her mother Maria. Both are on their way to spend the holidays in a research station in the Amazon jungle. The sky quickly turned pitch black and a bolt of lightning struck the aircraft. In a split second, the deafening sound of the fuselage shattering mid-air caused panic and confusion. Before she can even process the situation, Julian found herself free-falling while still strapped to her seat, spinning through clouds with wind screaming in her ears, and then silence. She woke up the next day on the jungle floor, somehow miraculously alive. When reality finally set in, she found herself with a broken collarbone, deep gashes, one shoe, and no supplies. Thankfully, she was raised by biologists, so she knew the rainforest quite well. Despite her injuries, Julian waded through murky water, struggled with insects, and ate whatever little she could find. Days passed and her wounds began to fester. She heard planes above, but the forest was too thick for anyone to notice her. The situation was getting worse, but there was no other choice than to press on. After 10 days, she found an encampment that was set up by local lumberjacks. They doused her infected wounds with gasoline and used the canoe to transport her to a more inhabited area where she was airlifted to a hospital. Julian Kupka had survived a mind-blowing 10,000-foot fall, the jungle, and 11 days all by herself. Of the 92 people on Flight 508, she was the only one that survived. Julian went on to become a biologist like her parents. She rarely spoke of the crash, but her story is one to prove of resilience, knowledge, and unbreakable will. In April 2003, a 27-year-old experienced outdoorsman sat alone on a hiking and canyoneering trip in Blue John Canyon, which is a very remote part of Utah's desert. Aaron didn't inform anyone about his plans or where he was going. As he descended into a narrow slot canyon, a boulder suddenly shifted and crushed his right arm against the canyon wall, pinning him. He was only carrying minimal food and water in his bag, which he rationed for 5 agonizing days. Ralston did what he could to release himself. Using a dull out multi-tool, he first tried chipping at the rock. He then set up a pulley with his climbing gear, but all of it to no avail. Ralston drank his own urine in order to conserve water. As hope faded and his body weakening, he began recording goodbye messages to his family on his video camera. On the 6th day, with no other option than death looming, Aaron made a desperate and courageous decision to break his forearm. He then proceeded to amputate himself, which took over an hour of agonizing pain. Still dizzy from the blood loss, he rappelled down a 65-foot drop and hiked 6 miles before finally encountering a family who helped him get rescued. Aaron Ralston survived, and his story became a symbol of human defiance and willpower. He later wrote a book titled Between a Rock and a Hard Place, which inspired the movie 127 Hours. Our next story happened in 1914 as Europe marched its way to war. Ernest Shackleton prepared himself for a different kind of battle, a conquest against nature herself. His goal was to lead the Imperial Trans-Antarctic Expedition, which is the first ever crossing of the Antarctic continent. Shackleton's ship, the Endurance, was purpose-built to withstand ice. Sailing from Weddell Sea with a crew of 28, their spirits were high and they were drunk from the shimmer of glory over the horizon. By early 1915, Endurance became trapped in thick pack ice and was frozen in place. Days turned to weeks, which eventually turned to months. But under his confident and calm command, they maintained discipline and kept themselves occupied by playing football on ice, celebrating birthdays, and sharing stories of when they were back at home. After 10 months trapped in ice, their ship couldn't bear no more. It was crushed and sank into the abyss. Thus begins their story of grit and perseverance. They camped on makeshift tents and dragged their heavy lifeboats, while eating seal meat along the way. When the ice finally gave a small opening, they braved 5 days and 5 nights on their open boats, eventually reaching Elephant Island, which is a desolate and inhospitable place. Knowing rescue was impossible, Shackleton made the unthinkable choice of sailing 800 miles in a 22-foot lifeboat across the storm-riddled Southern Ocean and hopefully reached South Georgia. With 5 men, they fought monstrous waves and skin-blistering cold. On April 30th, 1916, they eventually reached their destination, but they were on the wrong side of the island. 2 of his men were too weak to continue, so the rest of them crossed 36 miles of mountains and glaciers without maps, ropes, or even sleep. Through sheer perseverance, they stumbled on a whaling station at Stromness, and the first thing that he said was, "My men are alive." It would take 4 months and 3 failed attempts, but Shackleton did not stop until everyone was brought home. Amazingly, not one of the 28-man crew lost their lives. In January 1982, Stephen Callahan set off on a solo voyage across the Atlantic in his 6.5-meter sailboat named Napoleon Solo. But after just a few days at sea, disaster struck. His boat encountered a storm and was severely damaged underneath. Callahan suspects that it was actually caused by a whale collision. Unable to stay aboard, he jumped in the inflatable life raft, which only measured 1.8 meters across. Luckily, despite the chaos, he was able to gather supplies like a sleeping bag, emergency kit, solar stills for producing water, and a copy of Sea Survival, which is a manual written by another ocean survivor. Alone in the vast Atlantic Ocean, Stephen faced incredible challenges like the scorching sun, freezing nights, hunger, thirst, and crushing loneliness on the open sea. For 76 long days, he managed to survive by fishing with handmade tools, collecting rainwater in plastic bags, and rationing the meager supplies he had saved. Stephen's resourcefulness and determination were extraordinary. He kept a log of his ordeal, repaired his raft, and fought off sharks. Despite extreme exhaustion and despair, he never once gave up hope. Finally, after more than 2 months and having traveled over 1,800 miles, Callahan was spotted and rescued by a passing ship near the Caribbean. Despite what he'd been through, Callahan had profound positive moments in his ordeal. On an interview, he described the night sky as a view of heaven from a seat in hell. He still sails the open seas with great vigor, but are now joined with a crew of at least 2 men. His survival story became famous, inspiring sailors and adventurers worldwide. He later wrote a best-selling book which shares the incredible details of his survival, courage, and human tenacity. This next one is definitely questionable on the heroic aspect of things, but a feat of survival nonetheless. Born on March 19, 1922, Hiro Onoda joined the Imperial Japanese Army at a young age. He was trained in guerrilla warfare, sabotage, and also survival tactics. By the age of 22, he was deployed to Lubang Island in the Philippines. He was given a very strict order by his superior. You are absolutely forbidden to die by your own hand. It may take 3 years, it may take 5, but whatever happens, we will come back for you. In February 1945, Allied forces landed on Lubang. Most Japanese troops were either eliminated or surrendered. But Onoda and his group fled to the jungles, unaware that the war already ended in August 1945. Onoda and his men still continued with their guerrilla activities and survived on coconuts, bananas, sacks of rice, and cattle, which was all stolen from villages nearby. Despite occasional shootouts with the locals and the police, they evaded American and Filipino search parties and were believed to have taken the lives of at least 30 civilians on the island during their time in hiding. Leaflets were dropped in October of the same year stating that the war ended on August 15. Come down from the mountains. Onoda and his men concluded that it was nothing more than American propaganda meant to lure them out. Near the end of 1945, they tried again by dropping leaflets with a surrender order from General Tomoyuki Yamashita himself. Onoda and his men studied them and still, they came to the conclusion that it was fake. Over the years, one of his men were eliminated by the police in 1950. Another was killed in 1954 when he accidentally stumbled on the Philippine Army Mountain Unit during their training. The last companion was shot by police during a mission where they burned locally harvested rice. At this point, Onoda is now the sole survivor of his group. On February 20th, 1974, Onoda met a Japanese explorer named Norio Suzuki, who was traveling the world with a weird set of life goals. Suzuki explained to Onoda that he was on a mission to find him, a panda, and the abominable snowman, in that specific order. They both eventually became friends, but this still didn't convince Hiro to surrender. He said that he needed his commanding officer to officially give him the order to stand down. Suzuki went back to Japan with his photographs of Onoda to prove his encounter with him. With the Japanese government's help, they tracked down his commanding officer, who is now a civilian and works as a bookseller. They flew back to Lubang Island, and on March 9, 1974, he officially handed him the order which formally relieved Onoda of his duties and made him surrender to the Philippine forces at Lubang's Raider base. A formal ceremony was held in the Palace of Manila where President Ferdinand Marcos granted him full pardon for any crimes he committed while hiding. Onoda's return to Japan was met with mixed reactions. Many saw him as a war hero who had remained loyal to the cause, while others saw him as a war criminal who terrorized locals and was too paranoid to surrender. Struggling with the guilt and burden from his countrymen, he moved to Brazil to start a new life as a cattle rancher. He eventually returned back to Japan and founded a nature survival training school. He died in 2014 at the old age of 91 years old. Even before the fateful events that happened in Siberia, Ada Blackjack had always been a survivor. Her father died from food poisoning when she was just 8 years old, and her mother sent her and her sister to a Methodist school where they learned how to read English and sew. Born in a remote settlement in Spruce Creek, Alaska, she married at the young age of 16 to an abusive man named Jack Blackjack. The couple had 3 children, but only one of them lived through infancy. Fed up with the constant abuse, she divorced her husband and walked 40 miles with her son back to her mother. In order to support her son who is suffering from tuberculosis, Ada Blackjack cleaned house and sewed clothes for minors, but it was still not enough, so she was forced to leave Bennett in an orphanage. This further fueled the fire in Ada to work harder so they can be reunited. She was informed of a job where Inuit women are being recruited for an Arctic expedition to Wrangel Island. While not entirely sure about the scope of things, Ada knew that her expertise in being a seamstress and a good cook would be a perfect fit for the job. On September 15, 1921, a 5-person crew which included Blackjack and a cat named Vic embarked on a journey that would put human spirit and morals through the absolute limit. Conditions in the island were initially favorable, but it quickly turned around after a year when rations were depleted. Unable to hunt enough game, the 3 men decided to leave Ada, Vic, and another man bedridden from scurvy. They promised to return with food and help, but they never came back. Eventually, the sick man didn't make it, and it was now up to Ada and her cat. For almost 2 years, they survived in a makeshift shelter. She learned how to trap foxes and seals, and they defended themselves against polar bears. To maintain her sanity, she wrote her everyday experiences in a journal and cared for Vic. Above all else, she read the Bible aloud for hope and comfort. In August 19, 1923, amidst everything they'd been through, the 2 were spotted by a passing ship and were finally rescued. Ada Blackjack and Victoria was rightfully welcomed home as heroines. With the money she earned from her story, she took her son to Seattle, Washington to treat his tuberculosis. Ada remarried to a loving husband and had another son named Billy. She returned to the Arctic where she lived a happy life until the age of 85. If you like this video, please consider subscribing, it's gonna help me out a lot. There's a couple more videos that came before this, so give that a watch too if you can. Until next time, stay tuned.